Unveiling 3 spine-chilling lighthouse horrors, terrifying, cursed secrets exposed after 50 years. The wind howled like a banshee along the jagged cliffs of Blackridge, its mournful wails echoing through the crumbling lighthouse. Karen could feel it clawing at her sanity, each gust spiraling into an icy grip that coiled around her chest. The lighthouse had become her refuge after leaving a tumultuous relationship, yet as darkness slipped beneath the door, whispers danced through the halls, haunting her in ways she never expected. Once a beacon of hope, the lighthouse now stood a sentinel, casting eerie shadows that slithered across the walls. With every creak of the floorboards beneath her feet, Karen's heartbeat quickened. "It's just the wind," she told herself, stifling her growing unease. But as she tucked her daughter, Emily, into bed, uncertainty gnawed at her core. The lantern room flickered above, casting ghostly apparitions across the room before it settled into a chilling stillness. That night, while the ocean raged and pounded against the rocks below, Karen found herself pulled into the attic, compelled to rummage through old records. Her fingers brushed against dust-covered boxes, revealing a journal left by the lighthouse's former keeper. Each faded page spoke of dark rituals to appease vengeful spirits, ties to the sea that the townsfolk whispered about in the obscurity of night. "This is just folklore," she murmured, a thin veil of denial covering her fear. But her heart raced as she read tales of mothers who had perished within these very walls, their cries drowned by angry waves. Something was wrong in Blackridge. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The cool autumn air grew colder, and the laughter of disembodied children flooded her ears, echoing through the floorboards like a sinister lullaby. Her skin prickled as a shadow flitted across the room, a brief flicker that left her breathless. The lines separating reality and imagination blurred, twisting into a grotesque visage of fear. The townspeople's friendly smiles morphed into masks of deceit. Especially the mayor, whose gaze lingered deeper than mere pity. Was he watching her? A part of her felt trapped, a pawn in a game she had not asked to play. And each heartbeat resonated a warning, a portent of danger looming ever closer. As she shoved the journal back into hiding, the air vibrated with tension. She glanced at Emily, blissfully unaware of the nightmares brewing in each corner of the lighthouse. But as the clock struck midnight, a chilling wind swept through the creaking halls, carrying with it the scent of salt and sorrow. Visions of the mother who had faded away, trapped between life and death in the clutches of the sea, clawed at her mind. Now, knowing that she was not alone, Karen understood her fight had just begun. She was not merely protecting Emily from her past, she was battling something much older, a darkness woven into the very fabric of Blackridge. The lighthouse didn't shelter them, it ensnared them. And as the whispers intensified, clearer than ever, coming from the depths of the ocean, she realized, survival could demand a price far greater than she ever imagined. The next morning, the sunlight struggled to pierce the thick fog enveloping Blackridge. Karen awoke feeling the heavy weight of dread from the night's revelations. Emily was still asleep, her innocent face at peace with the world, a fragile barrier between reality and the chaos lurking just outside. Karen's heart raced at the thought of what awaited her beyond the lighthouse's weathered walls. Determined to shield her daughter from the mounting horrors, she forced herself to prepare breakfast. But the scent of the brewing coffee mingled with a bitter edge of salt, clawing at her senses. Was the sea somehow crawling back into her mind? She glanced toward the window, where shadows seemed to writhe like serpents. Every moment felt scrutinized as if Blackridge itself had a pulse, doubting her motives. The townspeople had begun to gossip, their whispers trailing her wherever she went. Karen caught snippets of hushed conversations. "She'll end up like the others. A mother lost to the sea," they murmured. Panic fractured her thoughts. What did they know? who was she really facing alone? In a futile attempt to reclaim a sense of normalcy, Karen decided to take a stroll through the town. She held Emily's hand tightly, her fingers trembling against the delicate warmth of her child. Passing through the cobblestone streets, the mist wrapped around them like an unwelcome embrace. Townsfolk eyed her with a mix of pity and fear, their expressions twisted, as if they were spectators in a tragedy unfolding before their eyes. As Karen walked, an elderly woman approached them, her eyes rheumy and sad. "You should leave, dear," she said, her voice a trembling whisper. "The lighthouse calls to you. It wants something." She took a shaky breath, glancing at Emily. "It wants her." Karen's blood ran cold. She recoiled, holding Emily closer. "What do you mean?" she demanded, igniting a spark of defiance in her voice. But the woman only shook her head, retreating back into the fog. The rest of the day passed as an oppressive haze. They returned home, but the lighthouse felt different now, sinister. Shadows danced more aggressively, walls vibrating under the weight of unspoken secrets. That night, the wind howled, and there were sounds: scratching, dragging, whispering. A low murmur slithered into her dreams, tainting her sleep with visions of dark waters and despair. Emily stirred in her sleep, mumbling something Karen couldn't quite make out. The air felt thick, charged with malice. She stepped into the hallway, holding her breath as she creaked across the floorboards. The lantern room pulsed ominously, light casting grotesque shapes along the walls, but her eyes were drawn to the attic stairs, the darkness looming above like an unspeakable terror. Compelled by an invisible force, she ascended carefully, each step echoing with dread. The attic awaited, holding more secrets than she could fathom. As she reached the top, a cold draft swept past her, and she shivered, the sensation like fingers trailing along her spine. The journal lay there, still under a veil of dust, but the breath of the lighthouse felt different. Angrier. Then, a gasp echoed behind her. Karen spun around, heart racing. Emily stood at the bottom of the staircase, eyes wide, a shape emerging behind her, a fleeting shadow, darker than the night itself. A roar of waves surged from the ocean below, drowning out everything else. The lighthouse shuddered. Karen realized she could no longer protect her child. The darkness was here and it was hungry. As Emily cried out, Karen felt a sudden, terrifying realization: the lighthouse wasn't merely haunted, it was alive, and it demanded a sacrifice. What exactly would be the price they had to pay? Karen's breath quickened as she stood frozen at the top of the stairs, overwhelmed by the encroaching darkness. The shadow flickered and wavered, teasing her with its presence, then vanished into the murky corners of the attic. It was the not knowing that gnawed at her insides, the fear of what that shape could represent. "Mommy." Emily's voice trembled. "I'm scared." Karen forced a smile to her lips, even though her heart raced with panic. "It's okay, honey. I'm right here," she reassured, trying to sound stronger than she felt. They turned toward the attic door, but the deafening crash of waves resonated, shaking the very foundations of the lighthouse. It echoed like a warning from the depths, deep, dark, and ominous. She hurried down the stairs, pulling Emily close as they descended. The air felt charged, heavy with a suffocating energy. Back in the hallway, they heard a low growl, low like the grumbling of a hungry beast lurking outside. "Did you hear that?" Emily's little voice trembled. "It's just the wind," Karen whispered, trying to sound calm, though her heart raced faster. Little limbs wrapped tightly around her waist, and Karen wished she could will away the fear that bathed them both, but the winds howled louder, and with them came whispers, promises, taunts. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, shifting beneath the flickering light of the lantern. It felt like the lighthouse was breathing, alive and aware. Then, a creaking sound caught her attention. The attic door had swung slightly ajar, an invitation or a threat she couldn't tell. Anxiety twisted in her gut, the need to investigate overcame her instinct to flee. "Stay here, Emily." She swallowed hard and walked toward the door. It felt wrong, but a force greater than her will beckoned her forward. Each step felt like an invitation into madness. She stepped cautiously into the attic, Emily's small hands reaching out for her but falling short. As Karen crossed the threshold, the temperature plummeted. A chill settled deep in her bones, and her breath became visible, misting in the air. She turned to pull Emily inside, but the door slammed shut. The echo was final, chilling. "Mommy!" Emily's cry faded into the hollow space between them, and Karen spun around, panic igniting like wildfire. The journal sat there, beckoning to her. It was open now, pages fluttering as if stirred by an unseen hand. The words seemed to hum, resonating with a darkness that played at the edges of her consciousness. She stepped closer, heart hammering in her chest. As she bent to see, the ink twisted and morphed, revealing a horrific image, faces filled with anguish, screaming out from the rows of text, sacrifices made, mothers lost, darkness consuming them whole. Terror surged through her. How many had faced the same fate? The lighthouse was not just a structure, it was a trap, a predator, using offers and promises to lure its prey. Just then, a frantic tapping echoed from somewhere within the attic, desperate and frantic. It came from below the floorboards. Karen's eyes widened in horror, paralyzing her as she realized the tapping turned into a series of anguished cries, every sound pulling her closer toward the horrifying truth. With each cry, the lighthouse trembled. She felt the walls tremble, whispering her name, telling her that the choice was before her. The lighthouse wanted Emily, but could she sacrifice herself to save her child? As the shadows crept closer, thickening and suffocating, a chilling thought shot through her. Perhaps the lighthouse's hunger was not for flesh but for despair. She needed to act, to protect her daughter, but how far was she willing to go? With a roar of waves crashing and the growls of shadows encroaching, it was clear, something had to be done, or they'd both become trapped within the lighthouse's malevolent grasp forever. In that moment, something unseen stirred in the attic's depths, a darkness ready to unravel the secret that had held Blackridge captive for decades. Would Karen make the ultimate sacrifice to unveil the lighthouse's hidden horrors? And what awaited her on the other side of that darkness lurked. The tapping grew louder, a relentless drumming that gnawed at Karen's sanity. It throbbed beneath her, beating in sync with her heart, drowning out the whispers that filled the air. "Emily," she choked out, her voice cracked and fearful. She could almost picture her daughter outside, terrified and alone. The thought fueled a desperate urgency. "Let me out!" she shouted, banging against the door. The wood felt solid and unyielding, mocking her cries. Then, the whispers transformed, a chorus of agony mixed with hisses. "Join us, save us," they beckoned, a sickly sweet promise that dripped with treachery. Fear twisted in her gut, thick and heavy, as she realized those voices weren't just in her head. They lived here, in this cursed attic. With trembling hands, she turned back to the journal. Its pages danced as if alive, the ink pooling and reshaping to reveal horrific sights. Faces contorted in pain stared back at her, their mouths wide in silent screams. Their eyes, hollow and pleading, bore the same despair she felt now. This was a warning. Or perhaps a trap. Karen dug her nails into her palms, grounding herself. Focus. She could analyze the journal later. First, she needed to escape. The cries beneath her intensified, strands of desperation weaving their way into her bones. She felt them pulling at her, urging her to join them. She staggered back, gasping, replaying every choice she had made that led her here, locked in this hell with unseen terrors. Suddenly, the floor beneath her shifted. Not the groan of wood, but a scream echoing through the boards. It forced a guttural noise from her throat that warned her something was rising from the darkness below. Her heart was an erratic drumbeat, signifying survival instincts in overdrive. As dread enveloped her, Karen grabbed the lamp and swung it in a wide arc, searching for something, anything to fend off the encroaching shadows. The light danced, momentarily illuminating the corners of the attic, revealing remnants of the past, old furniture, forgotten toys, and photographs with faces scratched out. The sight made her stomach churn. "Mommy!" Emily's voice was faint but clear, calling from the darkness outside, pulling her back. She had to reach her. But something creaked behind her, slow and deliberate. A figure stood at the back of the attic, tall, with limbs that twisted unnaturally. Karen froze, heart thundering. What are you?" she gasped, her voice shaking. The figure's face was a mass of shadows, twisting into a grotesque smile. "You seek to end their suffering?" The voice dripped with malice, cold and consuming. "Or will you sacrifice your own daughter to free them and yourself?" Karen's survival instincts screamed at her to run, but she stood rooted in fear. "What do you want?" The figure's smile grew wider, its teeth glistening like daggers. "What they desire. What this lighthouse demands." The attic shook, as if echoing with the weight of forgotten lives. Despair plummeted around her. She needed to know what was true. With pounding heart, Karen forced her feet to move, stumbling closer to the figure, feeling her resolve waver. "Tell me," she roared, desperation clawing at her throat. In that moment, the shadows rippled, the dark form dissipating into a cloud of swirling darkness. From within, a low laugh resonated, sending chills racing down her spine. "Find the secret, Karen, or lose everything." Suddenly, the wall behind her erupted, a wave of shadows pouring into the attic like a dark tide. The journal flew from her hands, pages flapping madly, and she had no choice but to leap back. Her stomach churned. She could feel the darkness reaching for her, dragging her toward the maw of despair. The time for decisions had arrived, and the weight of the lighthouse's curse pressed down upon her. She could either uncover the horrifying truth hidden within those walls or surrender to the shadows that hungered for her soul and her child. She barely had a moment to breathe before she heard it again. "Mommy." Emily's voice called louder now, but mingled with it were new sounds, cries, laughter, and the unmistakable thud of a heavy object falling. A new terror gripped her, and without thinking, she sprinted toward the door. What awaited Emily outside? And what secrets would she discover if she dared to venture into the heart of the darkness? Karen flung the door open, the wood protesting with a grating creak. A blast of cold air washed over her, carrying the smell of decay and brine. Dread coiled in her stomach. "What have you let in?" The house loomed, its dark hallways stretching like gaping mouths, each one hiding whispers of terror. In the distance, Emily's voice rang out, urgent, desperate. "Mommy! Where are you?" "Emily, I'm coming." She called back, but the words felt hollow, swallowed by the oppressive silence that settled like a heavy blanket. She stepped out, heart hammering, each pulse echoing the frantic whispers clamoring for her attention. The shadows from the attic slithered behind her, waiting hungrily. She sprinted down the narrow staircase, each step creaking beneath her weight, warning her of the danger below. The lighthouse felt alive, the wood groaning as if struggling against the specter of anguish threaded through its very foundation. The living room was a morbid spectacle. Ruined furniture lay scattered, like the remnants of lives once filled with joy. Cold, dim light flickered from a broken lantern, revealing a scene that twisted her insides. The walls were covered with handprints, tiny and malicious, left by unseen hands. "Emily!" she cried, moving to the front door, but it swung open before she reached it. The sight that greeted her ripped the floor from beneath her. There stood Emily, eyes wide and shimmering. A look of grief hung on her face, accompanied by a group of shadowy figures that swirled around her. Their elongated forms twisted unnaturally, and hollow heads turned to Karen, mouths stretching into sickening smiles. "Mommy!" Emily's voice was strained, whispering through the cacophony of desperate wails behind her. "Get away from her!" Karen yelled, propelled by a surge of adrenaline. She lunged towards her daughter, but the shadows moved like water, blocking her path. "Join us!" they hissed, their voices a suffocating chorus. "You belong with us, Karen. End your suffering, shut up!" she screamed, hands trembling as she grasped a broken chair leg. Raising it like a weapon, she taught her body to fight against the encroaching darkness. In that moment of defiance, the shadows hesitated, flickering like a candle threatened by a storm. "You have a choice to make," they taunted, coating the room in an icy fear. "Will you save her or save yourself?" "Emily!" Karen cried again, pushing through the panic. She saw worry etched into her daughter's face, twisting with a sadness too old for her age. Come to me. You can break free. Emily took a step forward, confusion spreading across her features. Mommy, I can't. Anguish twisted in Karen's chest. The air turned electric, thick with palpable tension. She had to reach her. The shadows circled closer, and the house vibrated with a sinister energy, pulsing like a living being. Run, Emily. Run. And as if time slowed, Emily hesitated, glancing back toward the darkness that thrummed with evil promise. It was a moment filled with desperation. Then, the shadows surged forward, overwhelming. Karen swiped at them, but they avoided her grasp, merely laughing, a cacophony of agony echoing around her. Join us, they crooned, wrapping tighter around Emily. You cannot save her. Heart racing, Karen took a step back, searching for another way. Instinct told her attach herself to the light. The lantern. It flickered like a beacon, a call of hope. If the shadows feared it, perhaps it was her only path. Emily. She shouted, her voice raw, desperation clawing at her throat. Fight. You can escape this. But would her daughter listen, or would the darkness claim her like so many before? Karen's grip tightened around the chair leg as she animatedly pulled the lantern towards her. I want to let them take you. You are my daughter. The shadows shrieked, their laughter morphing into cries of fury, and in that moment, she charged toward her daughter, light in hand. Could she shatter the veil of darkness in time? Would their bond transcend the horrific grip? What terrible choice lay ahead for them both? As she lunged forward, the light from the lantern flickered violently, its glow radiating with an urgency that seemed to pierce through the thickening gloom. The shadows recoiled, drawn back as if stung by a sharp, blazing flame. Karen's heart surged with a sudden rush of hope. Could the light really protect them? Emily. She cried again, desperation wrapping around her body like barbed wire. Trust me. Come to the light. The shadows writhed, their forms twisting in a grotesque dance, the whispers of the damned growing louder, threatening to drown her voice. No, Mommy. Emily's voice trembled, the pain of indecision etching deep into her young face. She stood trapped, ensnared by the swirling darkness. The figures surrounding her pulsed, like the tide drawing back before a monstrous wave. They spoke in dark, haunting unison, stay with us, sweet child. You can be free, Mommy. Emily cried, tears brimming in her eyes, her voice breaking. I'm scared. Keep moving. Keep fighting. Karen lunged again, the lantern held close, illuminating the chaos swirling around her. The glow seemed to stretch, illuminating the walls that closed in around them. What she saw made her stomach churn. Faces twisted in agony stared back through the fingers of shadows, mournful violets of regret and endless pain. They had once been human. Join us, they whispered, coaxing, beckoning, promising an end to suffering. No. Karen screamed, raw emotion coursing through her veins, igniting a fierce determination. She steadied the lantern, focusing on Emily. It's a lie. They're trying to trick you. The shadows paused, as if considering her words, then hissed with a malevolence that sent chills racing down Karen's spine. You cannot save her. She is ours. You've lost her already. Karen's breath hitched in her throat, each word a dagger. Lost? No way. She is here with me. I want to let go. In a moment of clarity, she remembered the stories whispered among the locals, chilling tales of the Lighthouse's curse. Those who crossed its threshold were forever entwined with its darkness. It fed off despair, thriving on the souls that wandered too close. Emily wasn't lost yet. The Lighthouse hadn't claimed her. Emily, fight them. Focus on me. Karen shouted, taking a step closer, the light illuminating her daughter's terrified expression. She felt the shadows trying to pull Emily back, felt the chill of their grasp as if icy fingers stroked against her daughter's skin. Mommy. Emily's voice was barely a whisper, a thread of doubt tugging at her soul. Karen could see it, the conflict raging in her daughter, fear battling with the instinct to obey. With a surge of adrenaline, she thrust the lantern forward. "No. We're leaving together. Come to the light." The shadows recoiled again, shrieking in furious agony. The brightness of the lantern intensified, and the room warped, colors bleeding into one another. The dying light of the sun painted streaks of crimson across the horizon. Time twisted and warped around them. Suddenly, the ground beneath Karen trembled. Cracks splintered through the floorboards, the wood moaning like a wounded beast. She felt the house writhe, alive with the pain of centuries, and the shadows elongating in desperation, pulling at Emily with a ferocity that shook the very air. The light from the lantern cast an otherworldly glow, illuminating a glimmer of hope in Emily's eyes. "Mommy, I can't hold on." But Karen would not give up. She lunged forward, arms outstretched. Their fingers were just inches apart. The shadows pulsed, a blanket of whispered promises wrapping around Emily's heart. A sickening laugh reverberated through the room, deep and terrifying. "You cannot save your child." As darkness lunged forward, Karen felt an icy grip wrap around her ankles, pulling her back into the abyss. She clenched the lantern harder, light blazing brighter than ever. But in that moment of desperation, everything went silent. That in an eerie stillness, all she could hear were whispers that echoed through her mind, ominous and foreboding. "What will you sacrifice to save the one you love?" Time froze. What was the price of salvation? In an instant, she knew the dark truth. The light was just a beacon to fight the shadows. It was the key to something immeasurably darker, something hungry that waited just out of sight. Karen stood on the brink of an unspeakable choice, light in hand. But what would dawn after the shadows fell? And could any light truly protect them from the deep and aching darkness that beckoned? The echoes taunted her. Which side would she take? And what horrors lay in the shadows, waiting for her choice? The air around Karen vibrated with tension, an unseen force pulling at her core. She gripped the lantern, willing it to shine brighter, to be more than a flickering beacon against the encroaching dark. In that silence filled with whispering taunts, the shadows pulsed, now drawing closer, their forms transforming into indistinct figures of terror, faceless, yet familiar in their unnatural malice. "Emily!" she called, her voice strained. The shadows nearly swallowed her words whole, rendering them invisible to the only other heart she needed to reach. Every second felt like an eternity, uncertainty tightening its grip on her throat. Then, a spark ignited in Emily's wide, frightened eyes, forcing back the ink-black grip of despair. "Mommy!" With her small frame trembling, she began to inch toward the glowing light that was her mother, a resolute defiance flickering inside her like a last spark of flame. Karen plunged forward, each step shaking the ground, her heart racing. "That's it. Come on, baby, trust me." The lantern swung wildly in her grasp, carving out a narrow path through the chaos. As Emily took a step forward, the shadows recoiled as if burned by the warmth of the light. But the sinister chorus only grew louder. "You are weak. Join us, sweet child." They began to blur, morphing into spectral versions of her own family, faces twisted in longing, mouths moving in silent screams. They reached for Emily, fingers outstretched, eyes filled with unspeakable sorrow. "Mommy, help!" Emily cried, the words drenched in terror as she stumbled back, overwhelmed by the deceitful wails of the dark. "No!" Karen shouted, desperation spilling over. "No, they lie. We are together." She thrust the lantern forward again, illuminating the very walls that closed in around them, peeling back layers of anguish etched into the wood. Then the ground surged violently, pulling at her feet. There was a weighted pressure in the atmosphere, as if the entire lighthouse exhaled, a deep and dreadful breath that rattled the structure. Cracks spiderwebbed beneath her, the age-old timbers moaning in protest, as shadows closed in on every side. "Mommy! I can't hold on." Emily's voice echoed, tear-drenched and quaking, splintering Karen's resolve like dry kindling. She lunged again, stretching out her arms, feeling the very shattering of hope fracture beneath the grasping hands of darkness. "You won't take her!" Karen roared, rage replacing the fear that clawed at her insides. But at that moment, a new voice joined the cacophony, soft, almost sweet, laced with the memories of her own childhood. "Join us, Karen," it wafted around her like an enticing melody. "You could be with her forever." Instinctively, Karen recoiled. The shadows seemed to slither closer, wrapping around her ankles, a coiling serpent of despair. They were seductive, promising peace, freedom from the kind of pain that left scars embedded deep in the soul. "You don't have to fight anymore," they hissed, a chorus of lost souls echoing through her mind, tantalizing her with memories she tried to bury, moments of loss, moments of regret. "Don't listen to them," she rasped, voice breaking with desperation. Emily needed her. They needed each other. The lantern flickered in her grip, a mere ember now. Shadows crept closer still, caressing her with twisting fingers that grew cold against her skin. She felt the chill seep into her very bones, and panic clawed at her throat. "Which will you choose?" a voice whispered, wrapping around her like a fog. It wasn't just a question. It was an ultimatum. In that moment, Karen felt the most profound weight settle over her. Was she really ready to sacrifice everything? Her daughter. Herself. The very foundation of her existence. The shadows swirled, thickening the air, suffocating her thoughts. As she stared into the dark abyss, a frightening realization dawned: the darkness around them was not just a threat. It was a living force, hungry for a decision that would tip the balance between light and endless night. Time hung in the air, taut and unyielding. Karen could feel its weight pressing down on her, threatening to shatter her resolve into a million pieces. What would it take to save Emily? A single soul. The lantern began to dim, the flames licking faintly against the shadows that loomed closer. A flickering hope gasped for air. A final decision loomed, ready to unravel everything she thought she knew. What would she sacrifice to reclaim her child? And what darkness would rise in its place? The shadows hissed like wild snakes, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of torment. Karen felt as if every breath she took was filled with their despairing whispers. "Choose, choose," they echoed, wrapping around her like a suffocating shroud. "Emily, please." She strained to see her daughter now. The flicker of the lantern illuminated Emily's face, but the shadows distorted her innocent features, twisting them into something monstrous, a puppet under the malicious control of the dark creatures surrounding them. Each frantic heartbeat hammered in Karen's chest, drowning out everything but the threats woven into the silence. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet surged upward, sending Karen tumbling to her knees. She dropped the lantern, but it flared back to life, casting jagged light across the treacherous wood. The shadows recoiled for just a moment. "Mommy!" Emily cried again, hopelessness staining her voice. "No!" Karen shouted, a surge of rage piercing her despair. With a strength born of desperation, she lunged for the lantern. Grabbing it with shaking hands, she felt the warmth radiate as if it could fend off the darkness encroaching on their very existence. "Get back!" She faced the monstrous shapes, fear morphing into a fierce determination. But that flickering light seemed but a small beacon against the overwhelming tide of despair. The shadows answered her, swirling forward, undulating in rhythm with her thoughts, her memories, the long nights of worrying, the aching loneliness without her husband, the endless spirals of doubt clinging to her soul. They relished in her doubts, feeding off the vulnerability she had never wanted to reveal. "Why fight?" they purred, voices intertwining like a hypnotic lullaby. "Join us in the peace we offer. She can come to you, you can be a family again." The very thought pricked at her heart, a temptation that made her tremble. But Karen gritted her teeth, pushing against it, wrestling the anguish clawing at her. "Stay away from her!" she screamed, forcing herself to rise, pulling Emily's name from deep within her. "Mommy, I'm scared," Emily whimpered, her voice trembling and small, swallowed by the shadow's grave. "I'm here." Look at me. Focus on my voice. Karen gasped, rushing toward her daughter once more, lantern raised defiantly. The light danced like a spell, and the figures hesitated again, losing their grip. For a heartbeat, the enormity of the darkness felt smaller, more manageable. But as she drew nearer, she saw the look in Emily's eyes, a haunting mixture of longing and despair. "Mommy, please, I want them." Emily's voice quaked, and the shadows grew wild with anticipation, licking at her feet, beckoning her closer. "No. They lie. You don't want them. You want me." Karen shrieked, a guttural cry that ripped from her throat. She felt the ground tremble beneath her, bracing for another violent thrust. The lantern flickered again, dimming, threatening to snuff out under the weight of despair swirling around them, and then, piercing through the grim air, a chilling thought gripped Karen's mind. What if she couldn't save Emily? What if the darkness had already woven itself into the very fabric of her daughter's soul? "No, no, we will not join you," Karen howled, turning again towards the shadows. She had one last chance. Plunging the lantern down, she drew a glimmering arc of light into the encroaching shadows, determined to force them back, but the shadows emanated a terrible screech, rising in fury, rattling the lighthouse with each wail of rage. "You cannot resist, we will take her." They screamed, and their forms swelled, threatening to engulf her and her only child in their endless depths. In that split second, Karen realized she didn't know how to fight this. Every ounce of love, every desperate moment spent fighting for Emily seemed to teeter on the brink of annihilation. "Mommy, help me!" Emily wailed as the ground splintered beneath their feet. "Hold on, Emily. I swear I won't leave you." But shadows were wrapping around her, pulling her back into their suffocating embrace that as darkness dragged her into its depths. She could barely breathe. Would this be the end? Was she too late? Then, just as despair gripped her heart, a final breath escaped her lips. "I will choose you. I choose us." The lantern flickered one last time. In that moment, something within the depths stirred, calling attention like a whisper echoing in the dark. Karen's heart raced as the world fell silent. What unseen power awaited them in that darkness? Would there be salvation, or would they both be lost forever? The lantern sputtered, casting a final halo of light around them. Shadows writhed, their sinister forms twisting and nodding in the dying glow. Just as the darkness threatened to swallow them whole, an unexpected chill coursed through Karen's veins, more intense than the eerie winds that howled around the lighthouse. With the flickering light at her side, she felt a sudden, jarring shift in the air, a current of energy screaming to be set free. Whispers transformed. The serpent-like hisses now morphed into a fragmented melody, an otherworldly song ensnaring her thoughts. Had the shadows turned to vengeful spirits, murmuring secrets from long ago? Or had the darkness simply conjured another trap? "Mommy!" Emily's voice pierced through, frail yet unwavering. Karen could see her daughter clearer now, the shadows retreating momentarily. The light from the lantern revealed the tendrils of darkness pulling at Emily, like a thick fog creeping towards a flame. At that moment, sheer panic ignited within Karen. "I know you're in there, Emily. Fight. Please." Her own voice sounded alien, swallowed by desperation. As the lantern flickered again, a different sound detonated, crackling, like dry leaves in a merciless autumn wind. For a fleeting moment, shadows filled the air with anguished cries of those who had come before, trapped within the abyss. The haunting voices swirled, carrying tales of lost souls, promises made too late. Pain radiated from each whisper, and Karen recognized the dread of those who lived without hope. "Gift your heart," the shadows chanted rhythmically, stretching with grotesque glee, a macabre dance that made her skin prickle. "And she will be yours once more." The sudden urge to free Emily surged within her. Would it be so terrible to give in? To relinquish herself for her daughter's peace? Heart pounding, she wrestled with the thought, feeling as if a weight bore down upon her. "No. I will not betray what we share." Karen roared defiantly, the lantern burning a shade brighter. With renewed resolve, she hoisted the lantern higher, aiming it at the wailing shadows that clamored for her soul. You can't have her. She is not yours. The light pulsed, creating a barrier that sent a shockwave through the dark forms, forcing them to stagger back. Then, they retaliated. The shadows surged, furious and desperate, flicking through the air like fireflies turned violent. Fingers of pitch-black darkness reached out, entangling themselves around Karen's limbs and pulling her towards the edge of the abyss where the lighthouse seemed to unravel. Every ounce of her being screamed to pull away, but she dug her heels into the ground, determination fueling her as she wrested herself from their grasp. Emily. Hold on to my voice. Each yell was a defiant stab into the dark, her love weaving through the shadows. But as she spoke, she felt Emily's grip weaken, pulled steadily by the whispers and caresses of the creatures desperate for new souls. Leave her alone. Karen's desperation turned into raw power. She needed more than just love, she needed the past to collide with this haunting present. And then, like a sudden storm breaking the tension, a memory erupted. Images of her husband flooded her mind, the warmth, the laughter, the way they used to tell stories together. You loved her. You promised to keep her safe. As she envisioned their blissful moments, she felt an ember within her ignite, brightening the lantern's glow to a blinding light. I choose love. She screamed, and for the first time, she would be unyielding. But as the light surged, so did the darkness, a flash of rage igniting the air. Join us and you'll never be alone. Silent fissures in the walls of comprehension cracked open in her heart as Karen reeled. Would the truth truly free them, or would it bind them forever in torment? Then the shadows lunged again, ravenous. The strength of their pull intensified, and she felt herself teetering between decision and eternal damnation. The fading words of Emily pierced through the tempest, gentle yet commanding. Mommy, don't please. What was she willing to sacrifice? What would she become in the name of true love? The question hung in the air, thick with dread, as the pendulum swung. Were they facing liberation or doom? Karen's breath caught in her throat as she readied herself for the next tumultuous moment, her heart drumming a frantic rhythm. Would she choose the unthinkable to save Emily? Or would she stand strong against the encroaching tide, ready for whatever was to come next? As the shadows surged towards them once more, Karen felt a fierce flame kindling in her heart, a love so raw, so unwavering, it surged forth like light piercing the darkest night. You won. Take her, yelled Karen, thrusting the lantern forward with every ounce of strength she had left. The light surged, brightening to almost blinding, cutting through the shadow's malevolent grip. For a fleeting moment, she saw clarity in Emily's eyes. Mommy. Emily's voice rang out, fragile but brave, piercing through the chaos. Karen saw her daughter's small frame shivering, shadows clinging hungrily. Time altered, stretching like a taut string ready to snap. Each beat of her heart echoed the age-old tale of mothers who fought for their children and the sacrifices made. Fight them, Emily. You have the power. I believe in you. Karen called, feeling the warmth of her daughter's spirit through the darkness. She squeezed the lantern tighter, envisioning all the love they had shared, the bedtime stories, the laughter echoing in the halls, and the promises made. The shadows gathered, yowling in fury, and it felt like a storm ready to explode. Join us. The lighthouse welcomes you home. But Karen stood firm, heart pounding with fierce defiance. No. We are not joining you. We are breaking free. The lantern blazed hot against her palm, igniting with the strength of every moment she had cherished with Emily. The light resonated, weaving through the thrumming darkness. Mommy, I'm scared. Emily cried, beneath the weight of the darkness pressing down upon them. But within the tremor, Karen saw a flicker of resolve shining through the shadows. Every mother's instinct surged as she freed herself from the darkness tugging at her limbs. I choose love. I choose you. Karen declared, pouring every ounce of her spirit into the light. The lantern flared, the light tearing open the air as if space itself bowed to the power of her heart. With a primal roar, she flung the lantern forward, aiming it directly at the swirling mass of shadows. The brilliance devoured the darkness, momentarily illuminating horrific faces twisting in agony, their silent screams of defeat echoing in the night. And with a shattering crack like thunder, the shadows recoiled. The light, a beacon of fierce affection, seemed to offer a hand of salvation to the lost souls trapped amid the darkness. The lighthouse trembled as walls shook with the fury of generations lost. "No. You cannot escape." They hissed, but their resolve weakened as the light engulfed them, illuminating the corners of despair that had plagued the town for decades. "Together, Emily. Come to me." Karen stretched her arms wide as the light reached out. Emily's eyes widened, but instead of succumbing to the darkness folding around her, she stepped toward her mother, defiance sparking within. "I choose you, Mommy," Emily shouted, an echo of clarity ringing through the chaos as she sprinted toward the light. With every inch that separated them closed, the shadows shrieked, desperately latching onto the little girl. But Karen's heart sang with each step Emily took, the distance shrinking until they were finally reunited, hands clasping tighter than ever, a fierce bond illuminating their souls. As the lantern flared with the brilliance of newfound hope, the darkness evaporated, scattering into the ether. The wild whispers transformed into heartening hush, and the lighthouse, no longer a song of despair, dilapidated but alive, sighed in relief. "Let us get out of here," Karen said, holding Emily close. They turned towards the door, the air crisp and clear, ready to leave the shadows behind. The moment they crossed the threshold, sunlight broke through the fog, illuminating Blackridge in radiant hues. The once oppressive weight lifted, leaving behind only echoes of tales once trapped within. They finally stood outside, the lighthouse receding into the distance, now a shell of its former terror. The wind carried laughter, whispers that turned from despair to healing. Karen knelt down, holding Emily tightly. "We did it," she whispered, feeling the tremors of past fears fade away. Emily smiled, pure and free. "Mommy, I wasn't scared with you," she replied, with tears of joy streaking her cheeks. Karen drew Emily into an embrace, knowing they had prevailed. They faced the horizon, a world filled with promise waiting beyond the darkness, a new chapter of their lives unfolding, unburdened by shadows, anchored by love. Before you go, listen up. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss any exclusive stories coming your way. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep the good stuff flowing. And I want to hear from you. Flood the comments section with your thoughts and theories about how it all ended. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need a dose of closure. Your support truly means the world, and together we can keep the stories alive.